I don't think you go into your conference room and go, yeah, we're about 2 seconds away from going out of business. We've got 1 foot in the grave, 1 foot on a banana peel. So you guys have a good rest of the week.
Business is messy and unpredictable.
Sometimes lonely.
So lonely.
So lonely.
And inspiration can often come from really weird places.
We pick up where the bullet point blogs and the highlight reels leave off.
We start with the stories. Welcome back to So Here's My Story. I'm Jody.
I'm Eliot.
And I almost forgot that I said that first. Did you hear that pause?
You gave me this look like, it's still your turn.
It's always my turn. And somehow I forgot. My mind was off to other things. Anyway, in just a minute, we're going to get into a really cool story that Eliot tells that hits on everything from ego to waiting too long to deal with things to having the right person come in and help you get clarity so you can make really hard decisions. But just a couple quick notes before that. We are very interested in hearing your thoughts and responses and feedback from the show, including your stories or just thoughts you had that you would have thrown in if you were sitting here around the table with us. And so for the next few weeks, we're just going to keep harping on this one singular call to action, which is if you have thoughts you want to share, extra pieces that you would toss into the conversation or your own story you want to share, you can either call our story line, which is 410-205-6055 and leave us a voicemail. You can also text that number if you want to text us anything. Or you can record your own voice memo and just email it to talktous@sohere'smystory.com. All right, let's go.
Okay. So here's my story. And I'm going to take us all the way back to the recession of 2007, 2008.
A happy time.
A happy time.
I could just, any of our listeners that were deeply in business, I think their blood pressure just went like, they didn't just click off.
This story's not going to help. But I think about
Stick with us.
Yes, I think about this a lot. So we had been sailing along like a lot of businesses in the years leading up to the recession.
And you had your current law firm then,
We
right?
had yes, this law firm. And we were doing, in particular, a lot of work representing banks. The economy was on fire. So if somebody wanted to buy a building or wanted to buy a business, they go to a bank for financing. The bank would call us. We'd do all the documents.
Gotcha.
So we did a lot of that type of work. And we also made a lot of money representing the parties in various transactions when we weren't representing the bank. So we'd serve as buyer's counsel or seller's counsel. And in the 2007, 2008 timeframe, business acquisitions, financing, et cetera, it fell off a cliff.
Oh, yeah.
The banks weren't lending. The values of real estate were way down. So the values of collateral were way down.
Yeah.
There was not a lot of money, free money in the economy. And as weird as it sounds, because there was no money, there was actually a tail off of litigation too, because lawyers and litigation are expensive.
Yeah.
And so you just couldn't afford that. So our business just dropped off a cliff. And we had staffed up, of course, for the good times.
Of course.
And I remain, but I certainly was back then, very slow to pull the trigger on letting people go.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I get that.
And one of the reasons, just looking into it, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, is because I know that I view this as a personal failure. Like if one of my employees isn't doing the job and I give them all the help in the world and reviews and talks and discussions and they still can't do it and I have to let them go, I don't like it, but fine, I can do that.
It's not fun, but
it's not fun, but I can do that. But if I have to go to them and say the equivalent of, you're doing a great job, but I failed in running this firm or bringing in enough business or whatever, that's what I felt like. Because of my inadequacy as the leader of this organization, you're now going to suffer a lot.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's how it gets translated in my mind.
Like anyway, I've fallen down and your knees are getting skinned.
Correct. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I would avoid this. And I would always think that, this month was horrible or last month was horrible. But, all we need is one big transaction here or two big things and this will break.
Yeah. And not to interrupt your story, but I've been in counsel with a lot of clients who are in those moments, not even because of a recession, just because of other things. And in addition to the personal failure piece of it, there's also this debate around like, I have good people. Like these are the people that I want. And if I let them go, it's not like they'll be there in 3 months. And like, can I just stretch it out? Cause I don't want to lose these good people. Can I stretch it to the other side so that when it's good, I will still have my good people.
Right. And then, and part of that, the belief that you can stretch it to the other side, I think, is also weaved into the innate sense of optimism or optimistic outlook.
I just wrote the word hope.
But I think that is a characteristic of an entrepreneur, somebody who does start their business, because they are.
God, you have to.
You have to be hopeful and optimistic to a certain extent, not unreasonably so. But anyway, so it took me a long time to pull the trigger, but I started to see more than just the handwriting on the wall. I don't know what the deeper analogy is, but I started to get really worried about it. I was digging
the financial health of your firm. Okay.
Digging deeply into the line of credit. So I had to call in an outside person, somebody that I needed to look at the finances, to act as kind of an outsourced CFO and really look, because my training is as a lawyer. I know how to run my business, but I'm not a CFO.
I see. So you weren't confident in your, which is interesting. There's another piece to this. Like, if you were going to do something that you didn't want to do, you wanted to be confident that that you weren't missing something.
Yes, I wanted to be right on the numbers. I wanted to know what my targets were, and I wasn't confident that I knew how to do that. And so I called in this person who had a great reputation, has a great reputation. And one of the most difficult, and I found that one of the reasons I found this most difficult to do is not just because I knew I'd have to take my medicine, or it's like going to the dentist when you know you have a cavity. It wasn't just that. It was because in talking to her, I had to, again, this is ego, but I had to admit that maybe I'm not really as good at business as people might think I am, or I'd like to think I am, because I was scared that she'd look at my
curtain
books
and she's like,
"Oh my gosh, geez, what are you doing? This is ridiculous. What do you mean you don't have these records? These systems? You're an idiot." And I'm supposed to be, especially since I am in the business of advising businesses.
Right.
Now, I'll grant you on law and business strategy and not on finances, but still, a lot of time that line is blurred in people's eyes. And I had the egotistical belief that, people would look at Eliot and think he's a really good business person because he has his own firm and he has all these lawyers and he has it. But now I'm going to this CFO and she's going to see that, no, I don't know what I'm doing. And so there's a lot of ego in there.
Sure.
And so we did meet. She went through all of it. And to her credit, she was very caring, had a great bedside manner. She knew it was a difficult conversation, but she didn't make me feel like an idiot, but she didn't shy away from hard conversations. And she said to me, when we got together, look, you need to cut $17,000 a month. And I know you can cut $17,000 a month. I know you can cut some money by, not buying as many pencils or whatever it is, but office supplies aren't the answer. You're going to have to cut people. That's your biggest expense. You're going to have to cut people. This is what you have to do. And I'm devastated by this, of course, because I don't like cutting people, and giving them bad news because it's my fault.
But gosh, if you're going to have to do that, there sure is some small blessing in knowing that there's no other way.
Right. And it was absolutely clear to me that there was no other way. Here were the numbers I had to hit. And she also said something that you're not going to grow your way out. Like you're not going to, you need $17,000 a month and you're not going to get a new client for $17,500 a month. And you're like, well, my problems are solved. You've got to cut. And so to me, that was actually the most traumatic time in this firm for me. And I've been running it now for 17 years. But that was because I had to put my own ego on the line, my own failures on the line, expose them to my people who I had to fire and who had to suffer because of what I perceived as my inadequacies, and expose them to a highly regarded business professional who would look behind the curtain and say, or have the opportunity to say, you really messed up here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm curious, did you wait a long time before you brought her in? Or was that, you did?
I did. I was playing out the
I wish I had a picture of the look on your face. You're like, I did. It was like,
because I kept waiting for, I didn't know the number, but I kept waiting for that $17,500 a month client to come in. Oh, I just know this is going to turn around. And and everybody on my team knew, of course.
Right.
that, when the major project they're working on that morning is straightening up their desk, they know that there's not a lot of money coming in.
Right.
But still, it took me so long.
And I asked that question, I mean, not to add insult to injury, but I think, because I think we all get into these kind of like, these things where you wait to really look at how bad something is. And then the fact of the matter being, it's possible, and I don't know if this would be true. It's possible if you had engaged her earlier and got more clear on it, at the very least, you could have softened the landing for some of your people. Like you probably would have had more resources to actually make it a little cleaner, or something.
Well, absolutely, because I wanted to give them some runway to find another job. Sure. I didn't want to come in on Thursday and say, and your last day is tomorrow. And by the way, your last paycheck goes through tomorrow.
Right.
So, and I didn't do that.
Sure.
But had I gone through all the steps that I went through, but done it months earlier, I could have strung out the severance a little bit more, or I could have made the landing softer, but again, this was, you said insult to injury. That was another way I handled it badly.
That's why I'm here.
And I'm fine with that, because
Let me see if I can think of any other things to mock you about.
Well, I mean, I'm sure I didn't dress appropriately. I'm sure my haircut was awful.
Oh, probably. No, it's wow. There's a couple threads here, and maybe we can hit on all of them. I think one of them is, I mean, it reminds me of when I was, right out of college and I was racking up credit card debt, and I was in that weird zone of almost like if you don't look at your credit card statement, somehow it's not as bad.
The object permanence rule of business.
Exactly. Oh, that's good. That's good. So I think sometimes the waiting to confront things, there's another thread here of when you don't, when you need help, when you need somebody else to look, and how hard that can be to have somebody else come in. And yet it is actually where there is a question of personal failure. Sometimes in trying to avoid looking like a personal failure, you are not doing a thing that actually would be the smart strategic business person thing to do, which is have somebody come in. I've had a number of people, interesting to stay on that thread for a second. I've had a number of people who I've worked with over the years, and I'm fine with this. But, they've either had a hard time hiring me because they have a story that they're supposed to have their act together and not need somebody else, which is just bollocks. I mean, it really does take a village. You have to have somebody else to talk through things with somewhere, somehow.
And that's true, although I know how deeply one can feel to the contrary, that I can do it all.
Oh, no, trust me. And as much as I stand on that soapbox and say those things, there are times where I need to seek somebody else's help, and I encounter every bit of that. So I know it's real. It's just easy to sort of diagnose that from the outside. But I have a few clients who do work with me, but would never talk about that. It's why whenever I'm out somewhere and I happen to be standing beside a client of mine at a networking event or something, if somebody says oh, how do you guys know each other? I never answer the question. I just sort of stand there and let the other, and it's really interesting. Sometimes I have a couple clients I have one client who will flat out say, she's basically my business therapist.
But that's exactly right. And if you're standing behind your actual therapist, you're not going to say, well, I've been in therapy for 3 years and Jody's been great.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so some people will be really honest. I've had other people make some fascinating statements. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I would have never and because they basically make something up, but I'm cool with that.
Which is fine.
Because I do a fair amount of I dabble in some operational work as well. And so introduce me that way. That works. But it's because there is so much ego attached in entrepreneurship, rightly so or not rightly so. I mean, I think it's one of those traits you have to be an entrepreneur. Otherwise, I don't think you're driven. I think it has to be there in order to kind of make you get on that highway. And yet it's one of the many things I think can be a huge trap when you start to imagine that you have to know everything. It's limiting for business. But that's one whole thread here. The last thread, so there's really 3 things we can touch on, is the value of clarity. This is a terrible metaphor, but it popped into my head 4 times while you were talking. And it's just reminded me of the times where I have had a pet that, is sort of nearing the end of life or has some sort of disease or something, and having to make that decision about when it's time to do the kind thing is it is the place in my memories where I could just zone right in on the importance of clarity. That, when it feels like you're not sure, it's a terrible decision to have to make. But to have the vet say, he is suffering, like he is in pain. Instantly, you know what the right thing to do is, and I have no problems doing the right thing. But when you're guessing, and not to use the metaphor of firing somebody to like euthanizing, but it is kind of the same. It's the same kind of responsibility.
Well, there's angst there, and I do believe that's true, because one of the great services that Carol did for me was by giving me that clarity. And so I was like, yeah, you're right. It is time. It's
hard, but you don't have the doubt.
And I didn't doubt, and I could see the numbers, and I wasn't the only one doing it. I had a backstop of somebody who's an expert who's saying, you know what, this is the decision. And it was helpful. Mm-hmm. It was helpful. And just to go back to your other point about ego, and this is my really nerdy background coming out, if it doesn't already in other episodes. But okay,
I love that you think that's hidden. But
yes, it's so well hidden. This is going to be a shock to our listeners that I actually am a fan of the original Star Trek series. And so there was this episode where Captain Kirk's where the transporter malfunctioned and he was split into two people.
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
one was the wolf and one was the lamb,
yes, basically.
And the wolf was kind of evil and it was harsh and had all of those hard edges to it. But the lamb couldn't make the decision. The lamb, they liked him. He was great with people, but he couldn't make the decision. And so in entrepreneurs, my story was not a condemnation of ego, which I liken to the wolf part of this, because you got to have the wolf.
Yep.
Otherwise, you're always going to be just following somebody else's lead, which is fine if that's who you are. And that's good.
But it doesn't make for a good entrepreneur.
Right. Our audience are entrepreneurs. They tend to be, and they have to have that ego. They have to have that wolf part.
I think any type of, even if you're not an entrepreneur, any type of leadership, like if you are the person.
Right, any type of leadership.
Take the word leadership. Leadership inherently is not walking on it's the difference in going out into the woods and like following that path that the Park Service has already, like really nice, like the NCR trail here in this area, it's not really a trail. It's like a bordering on paved.
Right.
It's really
all that's missing is a moving walkway, a people mover, which would have been helpful.
Clear. Yeah. Exactly. There's no decisions. There's no uncertainty. You just do the thing.
Right.
And that's great. But leading inherently requires making decisions about things that are uncertain. It's paths forward that no one else has already made that decision. So there's no rule book to follow. There are best practices, which are helpful, although sometimes they're misleading because someone else's best practices are not always right for you. Right. So it's like that constant decision between when do I follow someone else's rules and when do I make my own is really, really interesting. And I think to stay on that wolf lamb side of things for a minute, I mean, this is true for everyone, but I see it heightened even more for any kind of leadership because of everything that we were just talking about, is that there is this little stack of character traits that you have to have in order to be a good leader or a good entrepreneur. And every single one of them has like a nasty underbelly to it that you can't, but so you always have to manage that nasty underbelly. I mean, take like big picture visionaries. I work with a lot of those folks who can drown their organizations in new ideas constantly. New ideas. Let's innovate that. Let's do it better. And it can be exhausting to manage that, but you take that away, you completely eliminate that. And then your business doesn't go anywhere. It's like, understanding that kind of stereo equalizer of how much of these traits and when to use them and when to hold back on them.
And also who you need to compensate. So those big picture visionaries often are the people that could not do all the logistical details to save their lives.
Oh God, no.
No. So you need that person. So with ego, what I needed at that moment was somebody who I had to subjugate that, and I had to go to somebody who could say, okay, these are the things you have to do. You don't have all the answers.
Well, and there's an important part there that not to be stepped over. And I think using this kind of like mushy language doesn't show up in business a lot, but I think it's actually part and parcel to a lot of very important things. Is she was able to do that for you because she made it safe for you to confront those things. She didn't mock you. She didn't make you feel like an idiot. That was actually why she was able to escort you through that decision process, because I mean, it's not like she coddled you or something, but you picked her I think subconsciously you picked her because you knew enough about her that she wasn't going, you knew it would be safe if still uncomfortable, but no more than it needed to be, I guess.
In part, I did. I have to say, I picked her primarily because I knew that she was exceedingly good at what she did.
Yeah.
And I knew that she would provide me with the clarity that if she said it after analyzing all this stuff, I had absolute faith that she was correct. For me, I liked her personally. And yeah, I mean, I did think that she wouldn't mock me to the high heavens, and all that stuff and make me feel worse than I already did. But she was exceedingly good. Now, she approached her job, I think, from her experience, I think in working with entrepreneurs, she knew darn well that she's dealing with egos somewhere there. Otherwise, they wouldn't really have their own business and have started this thing. And so she had to tailor her approach to deliver hard truths in a safe manner.
Right. Well, so everything about that, yes, I think the reason she has a reputation for being exceedingly good at it, it's both parts. You have to have the capability at the checklist of she has to be good with numbers and business and strategic thinking. Absolutely that capability, but the character that goes along with it is, to me, is like the hall pass came to mind. It's not quite what I want. It's like it's the pass that gets you into the room so that you can use that capability is the character that you bring to something to make certain conversations possible.
Right.
Every time I've ever, my husband and I have seen a couple financial advisors over the years in different ways. And the ones we have stuck with are the ones that, that bring all that to it, because talking about money is a really, it can be a really awkward thing. We saw this one guy who just did the exact opposite. I have a whole story about that. I know you know the story.
I was smiling because I was wondering.
It's a terrible, and we did not go back. It was a terrible experience. But anyway, that's a story for another day.
Right. But I think, and I think that the point is that, again, for the story for another day, the ability to deliver your message in a way that you don't step on it is really important. And she was able to do that. But she had to, in a way, this is going to sound worse than I mean it, but she had to coddle to my ego. I had already kind of, put myself out there and said, look, I might have messed things up. You have to take a look. I need you to backstop. This is not a strength of mine. And that's hard to say when it's running your business. But yeah, she had to step in, and then, I deliver the news, and obviously we're still here and we're fine. But I often reflect back on that as a really dark time, but it taught me some really valuable lessons. Well,
and that's the part that I don't want to skip over, because we spent a fair amount of time talking about sort of this other person that comes in, and that's great. But as the leader, I know I have a couple of thoughts about what are if you could go back, if you're going to write the letter to 2007, Eliot, what are the takeaways? What are the things that you wish you had known then?
What I wish I had known then was the art of putting my ego second and putting the needs of the organization first.
What would you have done differently?
What I would have done differently, I obviously would have called her sooner. I would have communicated better with my team. I thought that my highest and best role at all times, every time, was to be a cheerleader. We're going to get better. We're always going to be good. This is just a momentary thing. This is whatever. And I did believe that. And I don't think you go into your conference room and go, yeah, we're about two seconds away from going out of business. We've got 1 foot in the grave, 1 foot in a banana peel. So you guys have a good rest of the week.
Enjoy your weekend.
So there's a line to walk, but I don't think I was as candid with my team. And the fact of the matter is that my team knew. They're not idiots. They're here because I think they're really smart. They know what's going on. It's a small company. We're not General Electric where they don't know.
And there's something very anxiety producing about having a leader that isn't acknowledging the elephant in the room.
That's exactly the point.
It's nerve-wracking.
Yeah. Is he in denial? Can we not have a real conversation about this? I would have had a real conversation about it.
Because both things are true. It's not good. And I do think we're going to be okay, but we're going to, but maybe not.
but I'm going to have to take a hard look at this.
Yeah.
I may have, it may have resulted differently if I had that candid conversation and actually solicited their input.
Yeah. Like, yeah, maybe they had some ideas.
Maybe they had some ideas. Maybe they had some thoughts. Maybe one of them could say, well, you know, I have this part-time thing over here I can do kind of to take myself off payroll for a little while from about 2 months, and I could come back and I could do this.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Who knows?
Because I, in that moment, saw myself as the font of all ideas.
See, okay, I wish how much time do we have left? Because now I want to dig into all that.
We're over time right now.
Man. Okay, I'm writing this down as a whole other episode because this is, oh my gosh, we have to do a whole other episode on this. When leaders imagine that they are the font of everything, not only is it massive pressure and stress, but I actually think it is a just tragically bad thing in every way, shape, and form. Like it is possibly the biggest tragic flaw of leadership. Yeah,
and I would like to do several more episodes on my own personal failings. So this deeply aligns with my own needs at the moment. So
we could just call the series Eliot's failure number 1, Eliot's failure number 2, Eliot's personal failures 3 through 7.
So we're talking to you, audience. Stay tuned if you want a catalog of my failures. Maybe not in a row, but they're out there.
Perfect.
So that's our story.
But the discussion doesn't have to end here.
No, it does not.
In fact, we don't want it to.
No, we don't.
That is why we actually have our private Facebook group,
which we started to make sure that we could get your comments, your rants, your thoughts,
your stories. You can find links to that group as well as show notes and links to subscribe via email and how to find us just about anywhere you can possibly find podcasts at sohere'smystory.com.
And you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at SHMS Podcast.
And since we know it takes a village.
Yes, it does.
We'd like to thank our village, our super talented, incredibly patient team.
And occasionally snarky team.
Yeah, but in the best of ways.
In the best
Lovingly
of ways.
Snarky.
Yes.
Good mockery.
So a huge shout out to the people who actually help us produce our show. First, our sound engineer, Tom Hansen.
Thanks to Christy Schmier for our brilliant show notes and all the other fantastic writing she does for us.
And to Taylor Mathauer for doing just a little bit of everything.
Including wrangling us. Which is no small feat.
No, it's not.
This is Jody Hume.
And I'm Eliot Wagenheim.
And you've been listening to So Here's My Story.